So, picture this. There's this guy, Jimmy Keene. Back in high school, he was the golden boy, star of the football team, popular, had everything going for him. But then he took a wrong turn into the drug world.
Free fucking scholarship offers. Hey, it was for it.
And that path led him far away from touchdowns and trophies. Now he's deep into dealing narcotics, and his life is nothing like it used to be. One day, Jimmy heads over to his supplier, a tough guy named Rog.
Hey, Jimmy. Hi, Raj.
He's not happy, says the stash he got wasn't up to the mark, shorter than what they agreed on. Rog, calm but serious, tells Jimmy straight up that he'd never rip off his clients. According to Rog, trust means more to him than his own life. To clear things up, Rog leads Jimmy into a shady, dim-lit room. Lights flick on, and boom, Jimmy freezes. Tied to a chair, beaten half to death, is his old buddy Danny. Turns out, Danny was the one who messed with the supply.
I had to get right with Burns' people.
Crying and bruised, Danny tells Jimmy he was drowning in debt and thought he could fix things by cutting corners. Rog, furious and ready to pull the trigger, aims the gun at Danny. But Jimmy steps in. He begs Rog to let Danny go and says he'll make up for the loss himself.
And a third for our friendship.
To save his friend, Jimmy promises to hand over 3 more kilos to cover everything. Trying to cool off after the chaos, Jimmy decides to hit up a fancy restaurant. There, he meets this gorgeous waitress named Rel. One thing leads to another, and well, you can fill in the blanks. Next morning, Jimmy's flipping eggs in the kitchen when things take a wild turn. The FBI storms into his house. They find everything, guns, drugs, the works. No surprise, he's cuffed on the spot and tossed in jail. Behind bars, he gets a visit from his dad, Big Jim, who used to be a cop. Big Jim looks like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's ashamed, says he feels guilty for letting things get this far.
Tell me there's a way out of this.
Not a quick one.
Thinking maybe he pushed Jimmy into this mess. He breaks the news. Jimmy could be looking at 5 years inside. But there's a twist. An FBI agent named Edmund Beaumont is offering Jimmy a deal. Come clean in court, admit everything, and they'll cut the sentence down to just 2 years. Jimmy's not exactly thrilled, but he goes along. The next day in court, he confesses to everything.
What you're pleading guilty to today is the sale and trafficking of narcotics.
Hoping to get the break they promised. But nope. Instead of 2 years, the judge smacks him with 10. Jimmy's in shock, just staring at Beaumont like, really, dude? Before he can say a word, the guards grab him and drag him off to serve the minimum guideline term, 120 months.
Term of 120 months.
You lied to me, Beaumont! You fucking lied to me!
About a full decade. Fast forward 7 months. Jimmy's now in a minimum security prison in Michigan. He's not just surviving, he's thriving. He uses that silver tongue of his to win people over. Inmates and staff alike seem to like the guy. Word gets around, and eventually, Agent Laura McCauley catches wind of Jimmy's charm and decides to meet him.
I hear you're making a real go of prison. No major beefs.
Jimmy sees Beaumont sitting next to Lauren and immediately gets suspicious, like, not this guy again. But Lauren tells him to chill, says she's got something important to share. She lays it out for him. There's only one shot at freedom, and this is it. The job? Get transferred to Springfield Maximum Security Prison,
We would like you to transfer to another prison and befriend someone.
where a sicko named Larry Hall is locked up. Larry isn't your average psycho. He's confessed to multiple murders of young girls, but every time he ends up in court, he claims he was just making stuff up. People call him a wannabe serial killer who's more into attention than actually being dangerous.
About that file has killed 14 women, maybe more.
But this time, the FBI is sure he's telling the truth, and they need hard proof. They want Jimmy to use his people skills to get close to Larry, gain his trust, and find out where the bodies are buried. Only then can they finally nail Larry for good.
The precise location of the dead body.
Jimmy's hesitant. This isn't just about out-talking a few inmates. Springfield is full of real monsters, and if things go wrong, he might never come back.
You want me to check into hell?
Lauren doesn't sugarcoat it. If Jimmy backs out, Larry might walk free again and keep doing what he's doing. She leaves Jimmy with Larry's full case file and tells him to sleep on it. That night, Jimmy's restless. He flips through the file, digging into every page. He reads about Larry's background, his odd behavior, and his weird obsession with little girls. Something about the whole thing gets under Jimmy's skin. He knows he has to do this. The next morning, Jimmy talks to his dad again and tells him about the undercover offer. Big Jim doesn't like it. He's scared, warns Jimmy about how dangerous it'll be. One wrong move, and Jimmy could be in deeper trouble than before.
There'd be a death sentence.
Later that day, Jimmy's stepmom, Sammy, visits him. Her face says it all. Something's wrong. With a shaky voice, she tells Jimmy that Big Jim had a stroke. The stress of Jimmy's case finally caught up to him. Now Big Jim's lying in a hospital bed, barely hanging on. Sammy begs Jimmy to take the deal, says this might be the one thing that could give his dad some peace.
Said that he had a headache.
Hearing that flips a switch in Jimmy. He's done waiting. He tells Lauren he's in. It's time to head to Springfield. Now, let's rewind a bit to September 10th, 1993. That's when Larry Hall first started his killing spree. FBI agent Brian Miller is investigating the death of a 15-year-old girl named Jessica Roach. At the scene, there's not much, just a report of a van scene coming and going from the area. Nothing solid. More than a year later, another girl, Trisha Rittler, is found dead. Brian puts the pieces together and finds a match, a van linked to Larry Hall. He calls his buddy Chris Dale, who happens to know Larry's family. Chris doesn't believe Larry could hurt anyone. Thinks the guy is just slow, not evil. But Brian pushes forward, orders Larry to be brought in for questioning. When they get Larry in custody, Chris's team tells Brian not to bother. Larry always fakes confessions for attention. Still, Brian wants to see for himself. When Brian meets Larry, he's thrown off by how weird the guy looks, especially his sideburns, which Larry insists should be called burns because he wears them for Civil War reenactments. Brian doesn't bite and jumps straight into asking him questions. Eventually, they start talking about girls. Larry says he hates them. They never talk to him. He admits he dreams about killing them, but says it's all just in his head. Brian pushes further and shows Larry a picture of Jessica Roach. Larry freaks out, shaking and asking for the photo to be taken away. Then he starts convulsing. Brian's suspicions go into overdrive. He meets with Lauren and Beaumont, lays everything out, and gets approval to bring Larry into the FBI facility in Illinois. There, Larry finally cracks. He admits to murdering Jessica. He says the nightmares won't stop and signs a confession, hoping it'll help him sleep. That confession sends him back to Springfield, where he's been before. Back in the present, Lauren checks in with Jimmy. She wants to know if he's really ready. She quizzes him, asks what he likes about women. Jimmy flirts with the answer, saying he just likes everything about them. Lauren pushes more. Has he read Larry's file? What does he know about Larry's interests? Jimmy tries to act clever, but Lauren sees through it. Finally, he drops the act and tells the truth. His mom cheated on his dad with different men all the time, which is what broke their family. Lauren sees that vulnerability and gives the green light. Later that night, Jimmy is handed plain clothes, put on a plane, and sent off to Springfield. He doesn't waste a second. On the flight, he wins over the agents, cracking jokes and bonding with them. Lauren watches quietly, clearly impressed. She pulls him aside and tells him only a few people, including a shrink named Aaron Zickerman and a tight security team, know about this undercover job. If things get out of hand, they'll be his lifeline. She also says she'll pretend to be his girlfriend and visit him in a month to help keep up the act. The plane lands. Jimmy gets ready, heart pounding. The agents cuff him again to make it look real. As the gates to Springfield get closer, Jimmy tries to steady his nerves. This wasn't just about getting out early anymore. This mission had become personal. At the very last minute, just when everything seemed set in stone, he started second-guessing his decision. Instead of standing his ground, he suddenly said, "You know what? I'm not cut out for this. I want to go back." He insisted that he wasn't willing to stick around in this damned, hellish cell any longer. But the FBI folks didn't let him back down that easily. They reminded him that his mission wasn't just about getting himself out of trouble. It was about stopping a real demon from breaking free of the jail. This demon was no ordinary criminal. If he escaped, he could go on to hurt countless innocent girls. Those words struck a chord with him. Hearing how crucial it was to protect others, he shifted his stance completely and steeled himself for the next step. With a deep breath and a determined look in his eyes, he prepared to step into the Springfield cell. Now, things get even more interesting. Inside the jail, we find Larry Hall, a guy who, believe it or not, had a side gig as a mechanic. Thanks to his surprising expertise in fixing engines, the guards always sought him out when something on the equipment went haywire. For several days, while everyone else played by the rules and kept to themselves, he managed the repair work and kept things running smoothly. Jimmy, who was now on this undercover mission, spent his days in the same facility, watching Larry from next door. Over time, he noticed a few things about the quiet man. Larry always kept to himself, rarely joining group chats or casual conversations. Each time Jimmy tried to break the ice or exchange a few words with him, Larry just brushed him off with a curt nod or a dismissive shake of his head. Their cells happened to be side by side, which gave Jimmy the perfect chance to observe Larry's every move. While Jimmy was busy trying to crack Larry's shell, far away from the cell block, Agent Lauren and Brian were busy combing through Larry Hall's old home. As they stepped through the front door, they were met by Gary Hall, Larry's twin brother. Gary came off as a bit defensive and suspicious right from the get-go. He told Brian flatly that he wasn't expecting any groundbreaking discoveries at all. He was pretty sure there wouldn't be anything incriminating to find. Gary was adamant that his brother, Larry, wasn't the monster that some people might claim, and he even went so far as to insist that Larry would be walking out of the jail any day now, free as a bird, just like he'd gotten off the hook in the past. Brian, however, wasn't so easily convinced. He shot back. Only time will show what really went down with Larry. He mentioned that Gary's own brother had already confessed to 2 murders in the past, implying that appearances could be deceiving. Then there was another twist that made Lauren's eyes widen. While going through some of Larry's personal belongings, she found a bottle filled to the brim with contraceptive pills, lying next to other cleaning supplies like alcohol and formalin. That combination was strange, to say the least. It wasn't something you'd normally find together, and it raised enough red flags for both Lauren and Brian that maybe, just maybe, those items were being used to erase traces of the awful crimes Larry might have committed. A few days later, things got even more complicated. Larry's lawyer managed to put in a request for a new court hearing. When Lauren and Brian heard that the judge had accepted the plea for a new hearing, they were caught completely off guard. The very real possibility that Larry might be declared not guilty and released was a looming threat. This new development seriously cranked up the stakes for Lauren and Brian. Their hard work investigating his shady past could all come crashing down if Larry walked free again. That same night, Lauren dialed up Brian on the phone, trying to ease some of his worries about the whole situation. "Hey, Brian," she said in a calm tone, "don't stress too much. We've got an undercover agent tasked with digging deeper into Larry's secrets. We're on this." Despite her reassuring words, Brian's mind was still reeling. He couldn't shake the feeling that this undercover approach might not yield any real results. In a moment of raw frustration, he ended the call abruptly, not quite sure how to move forward. Once the call was over, Brian's attention shifted to his daughter, who was quietly playing in the corner of the room. As he watched her, a heavy wave of worry washed over him. The thought of keeping her safe from the very monsters that lurked out there in society was almost too much to bear. It forced him to wonder how he could ever shield her from such dark realities. The following day, Lauren sat down with Brian to lay out all the details about Jimmy's mission. She explained that Jimmy, despite his murky past in a narcotics case, had a certain charm that made him pretty good at making friends fast. This unique trait meant he had the potential to get close to Larry and coax out some secrets that might otherwise remain hidden. Brian, though emotionally drained by everything, agreed that it was worth a try. He couldn't help but sarcasmically call Larry Hall a master actor for his talent in switching between confessions and denials. Basically, a guy who could kill, confess, and then walk free with a wink, all at the same time. Lauren then handed Brian more files on Larry, urging him to dive deeper into his past, because every detail could be the key to cracking the case wide open. Meanwhile, in Springfield, Jimmy continued on with his own set of challenges. He soon met Dr. Zickerman, a doctor who was helping keep tabs on him. The doctor said that if Jimmy ever needed anything, he was just a call away, but stressed that it all had to be kept under wraps. Dr. Zickerman also mentioned that Jimmy should come by only once a week to avoid any unnecessary attention to their undercover work. On top of that, the doc prescribed him some antidepressants to help with the stress. Jimmy, however, was a stubborn sort. He insisted he didn't need any pills. He felt perfectly fine, but the doctor insisted, warning that things might take a downer in a few months if he didn't start taking them. Reluctantly, Jimmy agreed. Before leaving, he asked for the doctor's number, so he'd have a direct line in case of any emergencies. Dr. Zickerman scribbled down his home phone number and told Jimmy to only use it if it was absolutely necessary. As Jimmy was settling into his new life behind bars, he started noticing little quirks among the inmates. One day, sitting at the dining table, he spotted Larry sitting all alone, working his way through a meal. Everyone else seemed to deliberately steer clear of him, probably because of his reputation. Seizing this as his big chance, Jimmy decided it was time to bridge that gap. When picking up his medications from the prison's tiny medical store, he called out a casual "hey there" to Larry. But true to form, Larry just mumbled something and headed back to his cell without a word. That only fueled Jimmy's determination to break through his silence even more. The very next day, in the common room, Larry was watching a TV show, maybe a comedy, maybe a drama. Suddenly, a large, intimidating inmate barged in and forcefully switched the channel to something else. Seeing an opening, Jimmy decided to step in. He got up, changed the channel back to the original show, and made it clear that this was still Larry's territory. Of course, this act didn't go unnoticed. The tough guy immediately started barking threats at Jimmy. Things escalated quickly. Jimmy couldn't stand by and watch the bully have his way, so he threw a punch. No, several punches. Before he knew what happened, a couple of security guards stormed in, cuffed him, and tossed him into solitary confinement as punishment for the fight. After spending a long, lonely night in solitary, Jimmy was eventually allowed back into a cell. To his surprise, as he was trying to settle back in, Larry came over and asked in a soft, almost curious tone, "Hey, why'd you go after that guy for me?" Jimmy, feeling a mix of defiance and camaraderie, explained that the tough inmate was causing too much havoc, and he just couldn't stand that kind of bullying behavior. He went on to say that since they were essentially neighbors, it was only natural to have each other's backs. Larry's response wasn't immediate. He looked at Jimmy thoughtfully, clearly impressed by his straightforward attitude. And then, as if cracking open a sealed door, Larry finally decided to introduce himself properly. From that point on, the chilly distance that had once separated them began to thaw. They started talking, first awkwardly, then with more openness as a tentative friendship started forming. Jimmy kept an eye on Larry, hoping that by building trust, he'd eventually learn the hidden truths behind the quiet man's past. Every conversation, every shared moment, felt like a small step toward uncovering the bigger picture. Not long after this, a security guard named Carter approached Jimmy with some unexpected news. Carter mentioned that someone was there to see him, even though family visits weren't scheduled for that day. Confused and a bit anxious, Jimmy made his way to the visitation room. There, to his surprise, stood his father, Big Jim. His dad looked worn out and worried, and he explained that he had come over as soon as he heard that Jimmy was in Springfield. When Jimmy asked how his dad managed to get through security, since visits weren't allowed that day, Big Jim shrugged and said he told the guards he used to be a cop. Apparently, that little lie was enough to let him through. Jimmy's heart sank when he realized the risks. "Dad," he warned, "you have no idea what you're doing, okay? I'm here undercover, and if anyone finds out you've got a cop background, it could blow everything wide open and put all of us in danger." Big Jim's face flushed with embarrassment. He admitted that ever since suffering that horrible stroke, his judgment hadn't been the same. He even confessed that he felt partly to blame for everything going on with Jimmy. Despite feeling remorseful, Jimmy quickly reassured him. "Nah, you don't need to stress, Dad. I'm only here because I'm still alive today, thanks to you. You're the strong rock I lean on, even if you're a bit messed up right now." Their conversation was cut short when their allotted time was up, and Jimmy was reluctantly called back by the guards. Before leaving, he made Carter promise that the secret about Big Jim's ex-cop status would remain between them. Back near Larry's cell, Jimmy noticed some curious decorations on the wall. Pictures of Larry sporting a Civil War reenactment outfit along with his twin brother, Gary. When Jimmy asked about Gary, Larry explained that he and his twin share a rare condition called twin transfusion syndrome. Basically, Gary got all the nutrients in the womb, leaving him strong, smart, and rather handsome, while Larry always felt like he was left with the leftovers. Not wanting to dampen Larry's mood, Jimmy laughed and said, "Man, you're pretty cute just the way you are, so don't sell yourself short." Surprised by the unexpected compliment, Larry's cool facade showed a slight crack of gratitude. That moment of bonding led to a new chapter in their discussion. Larry took Jimmy on a tour of his makeshift mechanic workshop within the jail. Surrounded by old tools and scattered parts, Larry explained in a laid-back tone that he'd learned all his skills from repairing his old van back when he was on the streets. It turned out that these hands-on experiences gave him a unique kind of wisdom about machines, and maybe life too. As the conversation meandered, Jimmy shifted gears to lighter topics and began asking Larry about personal preferences, like what type of girls he liked. Larry's response caught Jimmy off guard. He said that no girl had ever spoken to him nicely. Then, with a darker twist, Larry started asking Jimmy some very inappropriate questions about his own encounters. Taken aback, Jimmy hesitated but managed to say, "Look, everyone goes through awkward moments, but that doesn't mean it's all cool." Larry, however, persisted in venturing into those murky details before a guard's sudden appearance cut their exchange short. Across the hallway, back with Lauren and Brian, another troubling piece of the puzzle was uncovered. The pair had been poring over the details of another cold case, this time involving a 16-year-old named Raina Ree who had been brutally murdered about 13 months ago. As they sifted through the evidence, they found some unmistakable links that pointed directly to Larry Hall. Among the clues was an unusual find: birth control pills from Raina, discovered in Larry's old van. Even though local law enforcement had ruled out Larry's involvement, saying he was simply an attention-seeking liar, Lauren and Brian were convinced. They decided to visit the local sheriff in Indiana to press further on why Larry had been let go in the past. The sheriff, looking a bit smug, explained that Larry was infamous for spinning tall tales that got him off the hook. According to the sheriff, Larry had claimed that the real culprit was actually Raina's ex-boyfriend. He even showed them a picture of the birth control pills, arguing that the evidence wasn't strong enough to convict Larry since no traces of those pills were found in Raina's blood after testing. Only other drugs were present. This explanation only deepened Brian and Lauren's frustration. Sitting in a dingy local bar later that evening, the two let their anger spill over in a torrent of exasperated words. Brian banged the table and declared, "Larry is the worst kind of brain-rotting psychopath ever. A guy who confesses to murders just to walk away free." Lauren tried to hold onto a sliver of hope, insisting that their final shot might be Jimmy, who had the charm and smarts to pry the real secrets out of Larry. Yet, just as things appeared to be settling, trouble reared its head on another front. Back in Jimmy's cell, Carter, a gruff, no-nonsense guard, approached him with an ultimatum that left him speechless. Carter warned that if Jimmy didn't cough up $110,000, he'd expose the fact that Jimmy was deep undercover. That kind of betrayal wouldn't just ruin his plan, it would shatter it completely in front of every inmate and guard. Shocked, Jimmy asked, "How the heck am I supposed to come up with that kind of cash when I'm stuck in here?" Carter's reply was cold and unyielding. "Not my problem, man." Desperate to keep the mission on track, Jimmy turned to the only person he could think of, his father, Big Jim. He pleaded for a loan of $110,000, explaining that if he didn't pay Carter, everything they'd worked for would go up in smoke. Unfortunately, Big Jim's response was disheartening. He admitted that he had already spent every bit of his cash on his medical bills and didn't have a dime to spare. In a fit of frustration, Jimmy mentioned that there was a speaker at their house loaded with 3 kilograms of narcotics. "Maybe I could somehow use that to get at least $10,000, he mused, thinking it might buy him some leverage. But when Big Jim later reported that he'd scoured the whole house and found nothing, Jimmy's anger boiled over. "Then it's gotta be your brother, isn't it?" he snapped, accusing him of meddling. Big Jim insisted that his own brother might have just dropped by for an overnight visit, something that apparently was a recurring theme. Enraged and feeling backed into a corner, Jimmy stormed off, fuming over the betrayal and the unexpected obstacles piling up. A few days later, Lauren came to check in on Jimmy. She was dressed to impress, wearing makeup and playing the part of his girlfriend to keep up appearances. Jimmy didn't waste any time. He told her point blank that he needed 10 grand, and fast. A guard was blackmailing him, threatening to expose his cover if he didn't pay up. Lauren frowned and told him there was no way the FBI would hand over that kind of money. This was his mess to clean up. If things got too risky, she said they could always pull the plug and send him back to the low-security joint he came from. She seemed defeated. They hadn't gotten anything solid on Larry yet. And for the first time, Lauren began to question whether the guy was even guilty. Jimmy, though, wasn't buying that. He was certain Larry was a monster, and he wasn't going to stop until he proved it. To him, this mission wasn't just about shaving time off his sentence. It was about justice for all the girls Larry had hurt. He begged Lauren to give him more time. When Larry left the cell one afternoon, Jimmy slipped in to snoop around. What he found made his skin crawl. Scattered among dirty clothes and trash were old adult magazines. But that wasn't what shook him. Flipping through them, Jimmy found disturbing drawings. Gruesome sketches of women being strangled, mutilated, or tortured. These weren't fantasies. They were detailed recreations of violence. Jimmy stared at the images, his stomach churning, before carefully putting everything back as it was and slipping out. Back in his own cell, Carter was waiting. He wanted his money. Jimmy told him straight up that he couldn't get it. Carter smirked, gave him a look that said, "You're screwed," and walked out. For days after that, the prison was weirdly quiet. Larry told Jimmy this was just the silence before the chaos. Something big was coming. And he was right. A full-blown riot erupted. Inmates snapped, turning on each other and the guards. Blood was everywhere, bodies hitting the ground. But through the madness, Jimmy and Larry stayed tucked away in their cell, steering clear of the fight. When the dust settled and order was restored, Larry got promoted to cleaning supervisor. He threw himself into the work, barking orders and scrubbing like his life depended on it. Watching him, Jimmy realized how Larry might have been able to clean up after his crimes without leaving a trace. One day, while scrubbing grime off the floor, Jimmy asked Larry about his childhood. Larry casually mentioned that he'd been digging graves since he was a kid, over 100 of them by now. Jimmy, clearly disturbed, asked if he wasn't terrified being around dead bodies at night. Larry just shrugged. "It's just meat," he said. That comment threw Jimmy off. He argued that people are more than bodies, that there's a soul involved. Larry didn't seem to care. He even wondered aloud why folks buried jewelry with corpses when the dead have no use for them. Then Larry shared a memory. As a child, he once helped his dad dig up a rich man's grave. When they found the body, Larry handed his dad the valuables. But when a ring wouldn't come off, his dad gave him a tool and told him to cut the finger. Larry did it. No hesitation, no guilt. It became clear to Jimmy. This man had no conscience, not even as a child. Then Larry asked Jimmy about his own childhood. Jimmy spoke of loneliness. His dad, Big Jim, was the only one who really cared. Things fell apart when his mom opened a bar and started seeing other men. The marriage crumbled, and Jimmy felt abandoned. One day, his mom's new boyfriend hit her. Jimmy tried to protect her, but got beaten badly in return. He ended up in a different room, nursing fractured ribs, while hearing his mom be intimate with the man who just attacked him. Larry commented that the real pain wasn't the beating, but the fact that Jimmy realized his mom loved that man more than her own son. Jimmy, visibly shaken, agreed. Then Larry asked a chilling question. If he had the chance, would Jimmy kill his mother? Jimmy didn't answer. He couldn't. But in that moment, he knew that Larry was wired completely differently. A few days later, Jimmy noticed the inmates whispering, glancing his way. He realized with a sinking feeling that Carter had ratted him out. The word was out. He was undercover. When he went to see the prison psychiatrist, Dr. Zickerman was gone, on vacation. A new doctor, Dr. Hackett, was filling in. Jimmy tried using code to figure out if she knew the truth about his mission. She didn't. That confirmed it. He was completely alone now. No backup. No safety net. Not long after, Jimmy met Chandy, the most respected inmate in the joint. Chandy took a liking to him and promised that his crew would have Jimmy's back. Meanwhile, Laura and Brian were chasing down a new lead in the Trisha Rittler case. They hadn't found her body, but they were tracking Larry's movements. They visited the last place Trisha was seen, where a gas station had recently been built. The employee on duty didn't know much, but he pointed them to a nearby mechanic. The mechanic, John Dickey, was a warm, fatherly guy, knitting a sweater for his daughter when they arrived. He remembered Larry well, said he was weird, made the young female workers uncomfortable. When Larry tried to flirt with his daughter Audrey, John kicked him out for good. He told Lauren and Brian that Audrey now lived in the city and might have more say. So, off they went to find Audrey. She didn't hold back. She said Larry was a creep who hit on every girl and once tried to push her into his van. He even gave her a bra in her exact size, which she found terrifying. Audrey then led them to the garage to show them something. A bicycle Larry had gifted her. Brian and Lauren were shocked. It matched the one belonging to Jessica Roach, a girl who had vanished. It became obvious that Larry had stolen it from Jessica and given it to Audrey. Excited, Brian and Lauren brought the bike to Edmund, thinking they had their smoking gun. But Edmund shut them down. The bike was old. No fingerprints would be left. Audrey's testimony alone wasn't strong enough. He appreciated their effort, but legally, it wouldn't hold up in court. Back in prison, Jimmy tried to call Dr. Zickerman, but couldn't get through. At the phone booth, an inmate tried to provoke him. Jimmy stayed calm and walked away. Later, while Larry was carving little wooden birds and animals, he asked about the phone booth scuffle. Jimmy, thinking fast, said the inmate was bad-mouthing Larry. Larry laughed it off, claiming he never forced anyone. They all loved him. After more pressing, Larry finally confessed to what happened with Jessica Roach. He said her bike had broken down and he'd offered her a ride. She got into his van without hesitation. Things went south fast when he tried to kiss her, and she fought back. Enraged, he knocked her out using a rag soaked in chemicals. Every time she came to, he knocked her out again. Jimmy asked what happened while she was unconscious. Larry said he didn't remember, that he blacked out. When he woke up, both of them were lying there, clothes already removed. The next part of Larry's confession slammed into Jimmy like a wrecking ball. Larry said that after he woke up next to Jessica's motionless body, he carefully folded her clothes like she was just asleep and placed a ring on top of the neat pile. Then, cold as ice, he dragged her to a tree nearby, looped 2 belts around her throat, and strangled her until she stopped breathing. But that wasn't the end. Not for Larry. With creepy precision, he cleaned underneath her fingernails, making sure no skin or trace of him would be left behind. He wiped her down entirely, making her body look untouched. He was trying to erase himself from the crime like it never happened. Jimmy sat there, stiff and quiet, but inside his stomach was in knots. His fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles went white. He wanted to scream, to punch Larry in the face, but he knew he had to play it cool. The evil, the heartlessness, the lack of remorse. It all made him question how someone could be so far gone. That night in his cell, Jimmy barely held himself together. Tears rolled silently as he stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the horrific image of Jessica, the way Larry described her final moments. Sleep didn't come easy. His dreams were filled with monsters, each one wearing Larry's face. The next morning, Larry strolled up to Jimmy with that same smug look. "Rough night?" he chuckled. "Maybe that story I told got in your head, huh? Don't worry, man, it was just a story. I make stuff up sometimes. That's what I do." Jimmy nodded, but he wasn't buying it. He knew Larry was hiding behind his lies. So Jimmy switched gears. "Yeah," he said coolly, "I figured it was fake. Honestly, you don't strike me as the type who could pull off something like that. Takes guts." That hit a nerve. Larry's smile faded. "It's all true. Every word. If you don't believe me, come see for yourself. After lunch, I'll show you everything." Later, Carter cornered Jimmy again, pushing to be part of his mission. Carter claimed he could help Jimmy catch Larry and maybe even her emotion himself. Jimmy wasn't having it. "You bug my cell, spread crap about me to everyone here, and now you want in? No thanks. Stay away." Meanwhile, Lauren and Brian visited Gary Hall again. Lauren told Gary they weren't there to dig up evidence this time, just to talk. Gary was polite, offered drinks, and casually mentioned that Larry's appeal was about to be accepted. Lauren didn't hold back. Then he'll be free to kill again. You know that. Gary didn't like that. He snapped, saying his brother might be messed up but wasn't a murderer. He stormed inside, and for a moment, Lauren and Brian thought he might be grabbing a gun. They got ready, their hands sliding to their weapons. But Gary came back with old photo albums. He handed over pictures of him and Larry as kids. "He's always been different," Gary said, "but he was brilliant. Could fix anything. Like a magician with machines." Lauren asked about something Gary had said before, about Larry doing horrible things. Gary hesitated, then told them what happened at a Civil War reenactment. He brought a girl to his tent, and things got a bit heated. Larry watched and tried to make a move on the same girl. She resisted. Drunk and unaware, Gary didn't stop him. Larry beat and choked her. Gary just stood there, frozen. "He wasn't my brother in that moment," Gary said. "He was something else." They helped the girl get home the next day with a biker's help. Gary had never forgiven himself. Lauren asked if he'd be okay letting Larry back into his life. What if he hurt someone again? Could he live with that? Gary went quiet. Back in the prison, Jimmy made his way to the basement after lunch. Larry was already there, crouched over a large, handmade map. Around the map were tiny wooden vultures. 21 of them. Jimmy asked why not 20 or 22. Larry shrugged. 21's my number. Always has been. The vultures protect the souls. Jimmy's heart sank. 21. That meant 21 girls. He asked Larry if he could sleep at night. Larry admitted to having nightmares. Jimmy suggested sending the map to the victims' families. They deserve closure. But Larry just laughed. "You think I want to go down for this?" "Nice try." Jimmy pressed again, offering to get a third party involved. Larry wasn't interested. In fact, he leaned in, whispered that he had plans to escape and start again. That did it. Jimmy lost it. "You're not leaving this place." "I'll make sure of it." Larry's face changed. His eyes narrowed. "You're one of them, aren't you? They sent you." He lunged, hands gripping Jimmy's throat. The fight was brutal. Guards raced in to tear them apart. Larry, bleeding but smiling, walked away as Jimmy got dragged off. Dr. Hackett showed up and ordered Jimmy to solitary. Jimmy screamed for Dr. Zickerman, shouting his number over and over, but nobody cared. In a tiny cell, Jimmy begged for a pen, a pencil, anything to draw the map before it vanished from his mind. No one helped. Desperate, He bit his finger and used his own blood to draw on the wall. One finger, then another. Hours passed. The wall turned red with his rough sketch. Finally, Dr. Zickerman returned. He'd been away on vacation. As soon as he heard, he rushed in. He apologized, promised to deal with Hackett. Lauren was waiting in his office. Jimmy sat down, picked up a real pen, and redrew the entire map. Every detail, all 21 locations. Then he told them everything about Jessica's murder. Lauren looked shaken, but they had what they needed. Jimmy was released and taken to court. The judge listened to it all, the risk Jimmy took, what he endured. And then came the verdict. Jimmy was free. Brian met him outside the courtroom. For the first time, he shook his hand and said, "Thank you." Larry, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. His appeal was crushed. The judge gave him life with no parole. Larry looked stunned. Later, he tried to end his own life, but didn't succeed. Gary came to see him. "I wish I'd done more," he said. Larry told him not to say that. "I don't belong here." Gary didn't flinch. "You do. Until you admit you're guilty, you'll never be free." Outside, Jimmy hugged Big Jim. His father cried. They got 5 more years together before Big Jim passed. And that meant the world to Jimmy. In the years that followed, Jimmy built a new life. He shut down everything illegal, started a real business, and made it big. On a flight, sitting in business class, he looked out the window and saw the familiar woods below. It was the same ground Larry had marked on the map. And for the first time in a long time, Jimmy smiled. He'd brought justice to the girls who had none.